Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is assassinations, successful and attempted assassinations. Assassins are not all alike. In the world of assassins, like in the world of computer hackers, there are those who wear white hats and those who wear black hats. Some assassinations are carried out by the good guys, others by the bad guys. It is the motivation behind the act of the assassin that differentiates between the good and the bad. One side is motivated by hatred and spite. It is not a question of perspective. It is wrong to think one person's terrorist is another person's freedom fighter. I hear that all the time. It's wrong. Rather, it's all about good versus evil, right versus wrong. The breakdown is very simple. Those on the side of evil believe that the assassination of a leader in the democratic world will bring about change and even topple a government. They believe the assassination will cause a vacuum, that it will bring about a downward spiral of events, leading to a change and making the world a better place in the eyes of the assassin. Anarchist assassins fall into that category, and there are many. Let's say in 1901, in Buffalo, New York, there was an assassination of a U.S. president, President William McKinley, the 25th president of the United States. Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist, shot the president twice in the abdomen. McKinley died of gangrene caused by the bullet wounds. McKinley was the third president of the United States to be assassinated. His assassin, like other revolutionaries, mistakenly believed that by deposing a leader via assassination, it would change society for the better. In a stable democracy, that just doesn't happen. Assassinations by evil people neither depose nor dethrone. Stability of government and the peaceful transition of power are part and parcel of democracy. Yigal Amir despised Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and on November 4th, 1995, assassinated him in Tel Aviv. Amir hated what Rabin stood for. He hated the direction in which Rabin was taking the country of Israel. But assassinating Rabin did nothing to help or advance Amir's cause. If anything, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin mobilized the country and significantly set back his right-wing extremist cause. White hats, the good guy assassins, do not even use the word assassination. They don't use that to define their actions. Their actions are most often euphemistically called targeted attacks or targeted killings. The United States targeted Osama bin Laden. The entity behind the death of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran targeted the Hamas leader. The purpose of these assassinations is not revenge, nor is it justice, although sometimes it appears that way. Revenge killing is wrong and is ultimately illegal under international law. The purposes of targeted killings is to prevent future attacks. More specifically, the person is targeted not simply for what they did, what they have done, but because of what their actions will mean for the future. Because the image they convey invigorates other terrorists, inspires and recruits new terrorists. Because they have been planning, supporting, subsidizing, and sponsoring future terror attacks. Targeted killings are legal and justified by international law only if they are self-defense moves on the part of the good guys. If they are simply revenge attacks, they are illegal. If the motivation of a country or an organization is to seek justice, then the terrorists must be captured and tried, convicted, and then sentenced. Note the significant distinction. Sometimes, during the course of a capture, the terrorist is killed, in a gunfight most often. And again, that killing is sanctioned according to international legal standards. Assassinations are not a new phenomenon. They have a long and storied history. In fact, the phenomenon existed long before the word was created. The Bible tells of numerous assassinations. The most famous is the assassination carried out by Yael. As told in the book of Judges, chapter 4, Yael lured King Sisera and put him to sleep with a warm glass of milk, then drove a spike through his head. Joash was assassinated by his servants in 2 Kings chapter 12. Yoav assassinated Absalom in 2 Samuel chapter 3. And of course, King Sennacherib of Assyria was assassinated by his sons in 2 Chronicles 32. Is there anyone unfamiliar with the phrase, the hurtful cry, et tu, Brute? While the words assassin and assassinate were relatively new to the English language when Shakespeare penned Macbeth, or even, for that matter, Antony and Cleopatra, the concepts were known well. The etymology of assassination or assassin probably comes from the Arabic hashishin, which translates to people who smoked hashish, hash. Hassan al-Saba ibn Saba founded the group of hashishin in about the year 1100, composed of Nizari Islamists who targeted and killed their enemies. The order of the assassins became feared and powerful. They murdered whomever they deemed to be a potential enemy. Their name is assumed to come from what they thought to be their pastime, smoking hashish. Today in our world, there are codified rules. Killing a terrorist who was planning an attack is not the same as assassinating or trying to assassinate the former president of the United States. To think otherwise is a glaring display of ignorance, moral, ethical, and legal ignorance. Coming up next, points of view. First up is a column from the Jerusalem Post. It was published on August 11, 2024, and it was written by Moshe Dan. The column is entitled, How the West Bank Became an Occupied Palestinian Territory. Subtitled opinion, the ICRC rulings have distorted and confused the issue of Israel's legitimate claims to the territories and are used to condemn Israel. This column does an excellent job of detailing international law and how it has been unequally applied to Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, the occupied territories, whichever term you want to use. I just want to dissect the beginning of this column in which Moshe Dan lays out the seminal part of his argument. This is how he begins. Shortly after the Six-Day War in 1967, the United Nations asked the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC, a private Swiss organization that is the official guardian of the Fourth Geneva Convention, the FGC, for its opinion on the legal status of the territories that Israel conquered, including Judea and Samaria, known as the West Bank of the Jordan River. Unilaterally, the ICRC decided that Israel had violated international law, meaning the Fourth Geneva Convention, and declared the disputed areas to be occupied Palestinian territory. The decision was adopted by the international community as law. The basis for the committee's decision, however, was and still is secret, as are many things in Switzerland. Now Moshe Dan, shows the inconsistency in concluding that the land is occupied. He writes, the ICRC later claimed that its decision was based on the Hague Regulations of 1907, particularly Article 42, which defines occupation. It chose to ignore Article 43, however, which stipulates that occupation occurs when the authority of the legitimate power passes into the hands of the occupier. Since neither Jordan nor Egypt were the sovereign legitimate powers in the territories, Israel's claims are not illegal. In fact, earlier decisions of the international community, such as the San Remo Conference in 1920, which supported the idea of a Jewish national home in Palestine, validate Israel's claims. Now Dan explains that at the time there was no state of Palestine, so these rules do not apply. He writes it very clearly. He writes, a Palestinian state did not exist at the time, nor has one ever existed. The issue of occupation in the Hague Regulations and the FGC, the Fourth Geneva Convention, refers to states, not to Palestinians. The ICRC has never applied its criteria to any other disputed territory. Yet, because of its special observer status at the United Nations, the committee is considered the authority on what constitutes occupation and law. Now the piece goes on to argue that by the legal definition in international law, there is no occupation. Now, there are people who vehemently, I repeat, vehemently disagree with this argument, not just the ICRC, as well as supporters of Hamas, and some supporters of the Palestinian movement. It must and should be noted that a very large percentage, a large swath of Israelis, also disagree vehemently and believe strongly that Israel is occupying the West Bank, and that that occupation has caused significant damage to the national psyche of Israel. From here, Moshe Dan turns away insight and analysis and goes into politics. So we'll skip that part of the essay. Next up is a column by Tova Herzl. It was published on August 10th, 2024. It's entitled, Straddling the Aisle, Israel Must Maintain Bipartisan Support in the United States. The column was published in Ynet, subtitled Opinion, Preferring Republicans While Turning Cold Shoulder to Democrats is Short-Sighted and Will Harm Israel in the Long Run. Ambassador Herzl addresses a theme I have often repeated and will continue to repeat it in the future. Actually, it will be the feature of next week's background briefing. Her salient point is that people understand that support for Israel must be bipartisan in the United States. This is how Tova Herzl begins. Ahead of the U.S. presidential elections in November, it must be said, the cold shoulder that senior Israeli officials turn toward Democrats is a mistake that may have strategic implications. True, along the broad and steady support for Israel and its security, there have been troubling voices in the Democratic Party that would have been inconceivable until recently. At the same time, Republicans are increasingly adopting isolationist positions that effectively renounce the United States leadership in the free world and will undermine the international standing of its allies. To my mind, the latter is more harmful to Israel. But fortune-telling is a risky business, so I will stick to what is certain. Now Tova Herzl explains that the only way ahead of it for Israel is to align with the United States, and the United States requires both Democratic and Republican leadership. She writes, it is certain that Israel can only be aligned with the West, led by the United States. And it is also certain that given the system of government there, Israel must not be identified with any one side of the political map, Republican or Democrat, and must not become a partisan issue. Herzl now explains the political process in the United States so that Israelis can and should realize that Democratic and Republicans work together in Congress. She explains, many Israelis are not aware that unlike in Israel, where the Prime Minister is a member of the Knesset and forms a coalition with colleagues that can then pass any law, America has complete separation between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Some Israelis assume that the coalition decrees obligate lawmakers. Simply not the case. I'm saying that. Many are not aware that each law undergoes separate process in the Senate and the House of Representatives, and then an agreed version is brought to the President to sign. The President may initiate steps, like moving the embassy to Jerusalem or requesting special assistance in times of war, but without the consent of both houses of Congress, he cannot spend a penny. The bottom line is that in order to get anything done, all three players, President, Senate, House, must be on board. She now explains the reason why it is so important to rely on both sides of the aisle. She writes this very clearly, and it's very important. We should understand it in the United States, and they must understand it in Israel. A country that relies on another, which has a divided body politic, must maintain good relations with all players. For decades, Israel's leaders and representatives were careful to display this parity. The Prime Minister spoke to the Speaker of the House. He had a parallel conversation with the minority leader. Neutrality was visibly maintained. Now Herzl tells a story of how careful Israeli officials used to be so as not to support or show support for one candidate over another. She writes a story, actually. She tells a story. She writes, Congressman Tom Lantos was one of Israel's greatest friends in Congress and was popular in his district, so his seat was safe. After a meeting in his office, he asked me to accompany him to a fundraiser in an adjacent building. Careful to avoid any step that could be interpreted as supporting a candidate, meaning interfering in elections, I did not enter with him, and we parted at the door. This principle dissipated under Netanyahu. The first major public expression was in 2012, during a visit of Mitt Romney, who was running against President Barack Obama. Romney, heavily supported by Sheldon Adelson, received an unprecedented welcome. It was clear that Israel preferred him. Obama won, much to the joy of the majority of Americans, Jews, who vote Democrat and are troubled by Israel's visible preference for Republicans. It is too early to know what will happen in November, and this is not the place to compare candidates. But lose or win, both will wield influence over their parties in the coming years, and Israel needs the support of both houses. In light of that, openly preferring one side in America's political divide is short-sighted and likely to harm Israel in the long term. Like I said, this is an important column. It can only be called myopic to rely on one party. Israel can actually be unifying. They can become a unifying force in a very fractured world of U.S. politics if they play their cards properly. Coming up, commentary through cartoons where pictures tell the story. I want to show you one cartoon and 6 memes. No headlines today, so sorry. Earlier, I spoke about assassinations, so I thought it would be appropriate, or at least interesting, to look at the dark humor that has permeated the internet and the media, poking fun at the U.S. Secret Service. So all the items that we're going to see today are about the Secret Service. It is truly shocking just how much material is out there making fun of the abysmal failure of the Secret Service. First up is a chart ranking the most scary things in the world: the dark, clowns, sharks, serial killers, death, and slightly sloped roofs. This is one of the funniest items, repeated over and over and over again. The Secret Service's original excuse was that the roof the sniper was perched on was sloped and dangerous for its agents. Next up is a meme depicting the biggest, baddest, highest budget security agency in the world confronts a slightly sloped roof. It's a great picture. Next up is a cartoon entitled "Every Legend Has Its Weakness." Samson has his hair and becomes weak after it's cut. Achilles has his heel. And of course the Secret Service has a slope formula. That's the mathematical formula for a slope. That is simply hilarious. The next meme is an ad for the Secret Service as agents are sliding down the roof. The ad reads, "Become a secret agent of the United States. Secret Service. Now hiring individuals with roofing experience." Next up is a famous nutty, blundering Keystone Cops. A report comes in and he repeats, "What's that you say? The unidentified gunman on the roof we've been watching for the past 30 minutes just shot Trump?" Again, you can't make this up. This next 2 panels meme has the IRS saying, "You owe us taxes," and us responding, saying, "We left the check on the roof." And that's funny. And the final, another meme depicting Secret Service agents saying, "All clear on the north end, over," while behind him are signs saying "Bad guy, sniper, and look here." In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas's office said that the PA leader will pay an official visit to Russia at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin. According to the Palestinian ambassador to Russia, Abdel Hafiz Nofal, Abbas and Putin will discuss, quote, ways to support the efforts made to stop the war and immediately begin humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. He added that the 2 leaders will discuss, quote, common issues, unquote. The Gaza Strip must be transferred to the control of legitimate Palestinian authorities, and Israeli plans for temporary control of the enclave are unacceptable, President Mahmoud Abbas told Russia's RIA news agency. He said Gaza must be governed under the auspices of the PLO and the legitimate Palestinian government. A senior member of Hezbollah terror group was among the dead in an Israeli strike in the area of Nabatea in Lebanon. The Saudi media agency, the channel Al Hadath, reported this information. In response, the Iran-backed group launched swarms of drones and rockets at the Western Galilee later in the day, wounding at least 5 people, one of them critically. Sky News reported that Jordan has informed the United States, Israel, and Iran that it will not allow any party to use its airspace amid the current security escalation and expected response from Iran and Hezbollah. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi reportedly told Tehran that Jordan will not permit Israel to use its airspace. In a related matter, Jordan has requested that all airlines landing at its airports carry 45 minutes of reserve fuel, and what experts see as a precautionary measure in case of an attack by Iran against Israel. Some airlines are already avoiding Iranian and Lebanese airspace and canceling flights to Israel and Lebanon, as concerns grow over a possible conflict in the region after the killing of senior members of the terror group Hamas and Hezbollah. 9 employees of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, may have been involved in the Hamas attacks on October 7th. According to an internal UN investigation which involved 19 people, for 9 of those accused by Israel, evidence obtained by the United Nations Office of Internal Oversight Services indicates that UNRWA employees may have been involved in the October 7th armed attacks, said Farhan Haq, deputy spokesman for the United Nations Secretary General, specifying that the agency would terminate their contracts. That's a very serious thing. Terminate their contracts. One of the piquante pieces that we're going to see deals with this issue later on in the show. The German newspaper Der Spiegel revealed documents from their Ministry of Interior that show a direct connection between the head of the Islamic Center in Hamburg and the office of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. The newspaper revealed WhatsApp correspondence containing specific instructions regarding the construction of Iranian narrative against the background of October 7th, and the evidence of financing the terrorist activities of Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Houthis in Yemen. According to the report, a few days after the terrorist attack on Israel, on October 7th, the Mufti in Hamburg received recommendations from Tehran on how to speak about the massacre by Hamas. This is an example. It was written to him that the Islamic resistance had no other means to stop Israel's crimes. In addition, thanks to the courage of the Palestinian youth, the Zionist regime will no longer be the same. Only with a long war at all levels of the battlefield, both political and military, final objectives can be achieved. That's unbelievable. The Social Security Division at Israel's Defense Ministry announced the formation of a pre-military academy for ultra-Orthodox youth. According to the ministry, the purpose of the preparatory school is to increase the motivation for meaningful military service for young adults who have graduated from ultra-Orthodox yeshivot, and to prepare them mentally and physically for enlistment in the IDF. The preparatory school is expected to start operating in November and will include about 40 trainees. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that Israel has a comedy show called Eretz Nehederet? Which means, what a wonderful country. It premiered in 2003 and was inspired by Saturday Night Live and The Jon Stewart Show. We have watched some of their skits in the past episodes here. These 2 pieces are very funny and sad at the same time. The first piece is about the UN, UNRWA, which stands for United Nations Relief and Works Agency. It's short but hilarious and so true.
I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I make sure my classroom has all necessary supplies. I'm an UNRWA worker, so of course I make sure all the humanitarian aids goes to those who really need it. She's an 88 years old pregnant woman, God bless her. I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I teach history, biology, and English. You see, my struggle.
Ya Allah, I'm an UNRWA worker, so of course I took a day off on October 7th. It's a national holiday. Come look at the video. You see? You see the one in running? This is me.
I'm an UNRWA teacher, so of course I run student exchange program. She's from Israel.
I am Secretary General Guterres. I was horrified by what was revealed about UNRWA. So of course I think we need to double their funding. This is the UN. Don't try to understand.
Next up is a parody and also a satire. What would the Oscars look like if Michael Rapaport hosted? It is so funny and biting and sad all at once.
Ladies and gentlemen, your host for this evening, Michael Rapaport.
Yes. Welcome to the 96th Academy Awards. Good evening to the millions of viewers at home and the 134 Israeli hostages who are watching us from the Hamas tunnels in Gaza. You guys have a lot in common with the beautiful audience we have here tonight. Neither of you have eaten in almost 4 months. Next year, I'm sure the hostage diet will be bigger than Ozempic. I can't believe it's already been 4 months. 4 months, which is actually the length of the first cut of Killers of the Flower Moon. I love you, Marty. You're the best. I love you. Anyway, I know you beautiful people are thinking about the hostages in Gaza all the time. You just won't speak up about them. If Hamas would have attacked Israel and kidnapped all the dolphins, you'd be wearing dolphin helmets and throwing tuna fish at the podium. And God forbid Hamas would have raped the gender pay gap. Oh man, Julia Roberts would have ran into Gaza herself with an AK-47. Julia. But I'm sure the hostages understand your silence and they forgive you, Hollywood. They know that speaking up for them could result in you losing some key fans in the demographic of 18 to 25-year-olds. Oh yeah, I know. You don't want to mess around with those notorious, scary Gen Zers, huh? They're far more dangerous than Hamas. They can kill you on TikTok, then kill themselves because they don't get enough likes. I know, that's frightening. No one wants to be canceled on TikTok. It's a scary, scary place. But it has been a really exciting year for Hollywood. So we decided to add some very exciting categories to tonight's ceremony. Who will win Best Actor who's made millions on playing a stereotypical neurotic Jew with back hair yet still won't show some solidarity award? Yes. And when you finally say something political, it's about the legalization of pot. What the fuck, man? You gotta be on crack. Pick a drug, Seth Rogen. Did I say Seth Rogen? I'm sorry, I'm kidding, Seth. You're awesome and your ceramics are fantastic. Museum quality. Get ready, MoMA. And who will win the coveted Best Unsupportive Actress wearing a black dress to protest sexual misconduct, but is too scared to wear a yellow ribbon tonight award? That's right, sexual misconduct. You know what I'm talking about, right? What the hell do you think is happening to the female hostages now? Hamas makes Harvey Weinstein look like Peter Pan. What's the problem, guys? Huh? And of course, who will go home tonight with the Best Actor who plays a dead Jew to get an Oscar, but will say nothing about actual Jewish babies that are still alive in captivity award? Yeah, by the way, the loser has to give back his fake nose. You guys don't deserve our schnoz. Yeah, what's the problem? Hey, get off of me. Come on, what is the problem?
We apologize for this interruption. Will Smith, if you're here, would you please get on stage and give us a hand?
I hope you enjoyed them, but know something. One of the methods Israelis utilize to cope with pressure and crisis is humor. These were two perfect examples. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.